Hey guys, so for today's movie review, I'm going to talk about the new film Two Guns. It is a film that stars Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington, and throughout this film, Denzel Washington is a DEA, and Mark Wahlberg, I believe, is some type of naval officer. They're both undercover. We really never know if they're good or bad. Um, they're both get into the situation where they have to work together. Um, they rob these banks that kind of makes it questionable whether they're good or bad. But they end up with this huge stash of CIA money, and there's these good and bad forces who are after them, and um, basically they have to figure out who does this money really belong to? Is this really the CIA's money, or is this way of these forces trying to mess with us so they can get this money over someone else? So they have to find a way to get this money. People's lives are at risk. Especially the people who are important to them. And so it's basically, can we trust each other because they're both undercover. They both don't know if this he really is this DEA and if this other guy is really a naval officer. So they kind of have that iffy factor. Who can trust who because they really don't trust each other at all, and they have to get out of this situation. They really have no choice but to work together. So not only do they have to work together, but they're both kind of at ease on if they can really trust each other or not with this big situation on their hands. So Two Guns, you guys, I thought it was an okay film. I thought, like I was saying before, it just kind of gets on and off. You really never know who is good and who is bad in this. Bill Paxton plays, this threat where once again we really don't know if he's good or bad. Could be a CIA agent, could be an FBI agent, but at the same time he could be this big mafia boss guy. But the film never really explains itself. So for positives and negatives, I think Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington play off of each other very well in this. They definitely have, you can definitely tell that they practice the script with each other because they just are really good at going back and forth with these, one-liners in these scenes, specifically when they're at like a diner or when they're interacting with people who they don't normally interact with. So really good play off of each other in this. I think they did a great job making some type of screen chemistry with each other that was definitely perfected in this. The film is very entertaining at times. There's a lot of scenes in here that are just pretty fun to watch for the most part. So if you're looking for two guys with two guns and entertaining scenes, Two Guns does it. For those who are big fans of Mission Impossible 4, and if you thought Paula Patton was attractive, you'll really think she's attractive in this one. A lot of scenes in here where she definitely shows off her body, and if you're into that kind of thing, if you're a huge Paula Patton fan, you'll be very happy with this. There's a few surprises in here that will kind of catch you off guard, but if you're a fan of Paula Patton, you might enjoy them. The film was very well shot. It's definitely not. I'm glad I can finally watch an action movie that isn't a shaky cam action scene movie. It's not Paul Greengrass. It's not shaky all over the place. They actually film these scenes as they're happening, and it's almost like a. I don't know who the cinematographer is for who works with Sam Mendes a lot, but the guy who did Skyfall, the new 007 movie. But they're very well shot action scenes. You can definitely see what's going on. There is as fast and as slow as the camera would need them to be for these action scenes. A lot of car chases. Um, they're just very well shot. You can actually see what's going on. You can actually tell that these filmmakers were actually shooting these action scenes. They didn't just cheat their way with the shaky cam. I really like that this film is actually a well shot action film. And speaking of action, I think the action scenes in here are also pretty reasonable. There's just, it's definitely not a film where you're not going to be disappointed about, how the action scenes were made and what they ended up doing for action scenes. Um, Pretty reasonable in that department. Also, the one-liners in this film are very good. There's a lot of really funny one-liners in here. A lot of scenes in here where you can just kind of watch and like, oh, okay, that's pretty clever. So one-liner wise, this film was pretty good once again. For negatives, I think there are better films out there that use this kind of premise with can these two guys trust each other, but they have to work together. They really don't have a choice. They have to work together kind of thing. It very much reminded me of Lethal Weapon in that sense. Though Lethal Weapon was more of a buddy cop film, it definitely had this sense of, two guys who really weren't comfortable around each other. They had two kind of different life goals and different motivations. And I think that's why Two Guns reminded me of Lethal Weapon so much. Um, so yeah, just a lot of films out there that I think do exactly what this film is trying to do in a better way. Um, Another negative I have with this film is that this film gets really confusing after a while. Like I was saying before, you just really don't know who is good, who is bad. Um, you know, Even if it is explained, okay, well, this person's a DEA or this person's a naval officer or this person's a cop. A lot of these characters do things. It's like, well, that's not really what that kind of job would do. If that person did that in that job, they would probably lose their job if they did that. So it just got really confusing after a while as to who was the protagonist, who were the antagonists. Because to tell you the truth, I don't know who was the threat and who was the hero and who was who, and it's just hard to tell who was who after a while. Um, that goes to my next point where it's very hard to tell who was good and who was bad in this because almost every character in this film does something good and does something bad. And after a while, it's just like, who are we trying to root for? Are we trying to root for Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington? Or are they, the villain of this film? Are they the threat? Are we trying to root for Bill Paxton and Edward James Olmos? It's very hard to tell after a while. I will also say, even though I was saying before that the film is entertaining at times, I think it's also very boring at times. There's a lot of really slow moments in here. There's a lot of scenes where it just kind of dies after a while, kind of the momentum dies, and then it does eventually pick up again. But there's those moments where it's like, oh, they could have done something interesting with that. Um, I think the film overall is a better rental. It's just I almost kind of felt a little guilty seeing it in the theater. I think this film is a much better rental. I think it's a much better film to rent on a rainy day, through Redbox or through Netflix. I think Two Guns is a much better film to experience on that kind of a day. Um, and also, you don't have to spend as much money to see it that way either. And also another problem I have with this film is you never get to know anyone. Like we know, like I can say, okay, well, Denzel Washington, his character's kind of like this. He's like this, and he's like this. He would react this way if this were to happen. But I really didn't get to know the character. I really didn't get to know, like his family life. How he views the whole situation here. He feels threatened. He feels like he has, a goal in mind that he has to do. But we don't really get to know his background too much. Same with Mark Wahlberg. Same with Paula Patton. Same with Edward James Olmos. It's like we never get to really know these characters. It just kind of happens. Bill Paxton does these really threatening things. We just kind of assume after a while that he's the villain. But at the same time, he's doing some things too where it's just like, okay, well, these guys are doing this, so maybe he is the good guy. He's just doing it in a very bad way. Um, like I said, guys, this film is okay. It's not a bad film. Like I said, it's entertaining. Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington play off of each other very well. But like I said, my biggest problem with this film is I just cannot tell who is who after a while. It's very hard to tell who is good and bad in this. Um, so I think it's just an okay film. So I'm going to give Two Guns a 7 out of 10. It's reasonable. It's okay. It's entertaining at times. There's some good screen chemistry with Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington in this. But like I said, it just gets really confusing. It's very hard to explain after a while. I really wish I could have got to know these characters more. I really wanted some type of background history with some of these characters. Um, give more of a human element to the film. And like I said, it gets really annoying after a while after you don't know who is good and who is bad. It's just a very confusing film. So like I said, Two Guns, it's an okay film. It might be a better rental than a theater experience. Um, it's okay. It's nothing worth rushing out to.